Trump approaches his 100th day in office. His predecessor is nearing his 100th day out of the spotlight. But former President Obama is ending that 3-month vacation tomorrow. He's going to appear for his first public event since leaving office at the University of Chicago. And there, he will lead a discussion with students about community organizing and civic engagement. Advisors say the former president does not plan to criticize his successor, but will advocate for his own policies, such as the Affordable Care Act. Here with me now, Mike Morey, former communications director for Senator Chuck Schumer. Also joining us is Ed Martin, president of the Eagle Forum Fund, former chair of the Missouri Republican Party, and the author of The Conservative Case for Trump. Gentlemen, it's good to have you with me, and Mike, timing really is everything. What do you make of how much people should read into President Obama showing up right before the benchmark of 100 days in office for President Trump?
Yeah, I don't think we should read too much into it. I think that the president took a well-deserved, relaxing vacation, and now he's about to get back into the public spotlight, advocating for the things that he cares about. I think a lot of folks are expecting that he's going to come out and perhaps sort of tacitly criticize the current administration. I don't think you're going to find him doing that. I think he's actually going to model himself a bit after George W. Bush, which is sort of not doing anything overtly critical. But I do think you're going to see him, and what he plans to talk about in Chicago is basically how do we get the energy moving? How do we get people organized? How do we get people out there actually advocating and working? And I think that he'll talk about that a lot. I think you're going to see him do that with his work with Eric Holder around redistricting. And I think he'll look at the mechanics of energizing the progressive base, but not necessarily overtly criticizing Donald Trump.
And just by showing up, though, Ed, I mean, this is, as Mike points out with George W. Bush, I mean, he really went away to Texas, started painting. We did not hear from the former president. I think when he showed up for Jeb in South Carolina, people were struck by how much he had aged. We had not seen him in public life, and he came out on the stump for his brother. President Obama is not going to be a shrinking violet, but do you expect, too, that, as Mike points out, that he will remain public but not active in terms of verbalizing any type of political disdain for a Trump presidency?
Well, I think it's interesting. You know, maybe I agree with Mike, Thomas, on that Obama's going to model himself on W in this sense. Both men, I think, were surprised, and in Obama's case, shocked that his successor was not Hillary. Not in W's case, maybe he thought it would be a Republican, McCain, whatever. And you know, Obama's legacy is every day being reversed. I mean, dramatically reversed in the executive orders, in the legislation, in the repeal of Obamacare, whatever that looks like. So I think Obama actually is in a position where he feels like he has to defend his legacy, and because it's slipping away. I mean, it's profoundly slipping away from him now. And he was ready to celebrate for at least 4 years, maybe 8. The bigger question will be what he said he's talking about, community organizing. Look, Obama never shied away from saying he was an activist. His whole life was activism, organizing. Even as a president, he used organizing for America, or Obama for America, in a way very different than anyone else had. So I don't know how a 50-something guy like him steps away. I think we're going to see something very different than W in the sense that he's going to be a public figure, engaged dramatically, and going to start leading that party again. I do think we'll see that.
Also, we were showing pictures there of the former First Lady, Michelle Obama. Mike, what do you think? You know, a lot of people are interested to see the former president, but also interested to know about what the former First Lady intends to do with her time.
There's a lot of us that would be really interested in the former First Lady getting out there. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think that she has made it pretty clear that she doesn't anticipate an any elected office anytime soon. But look, I do not think that Barack Obama is going to be a wallflower and sort of painting somewhere in Texas. I think he's going to be out there. He's going to be aggressive. But let's remember, right now, Republicans are in control of Congress. A Republican is in the White House. What Democrats need more than anything is not the former president out there being the face of the Democratic Party, but energizing the next generation of leadership of the Democratic Party.
Well, and they also get to be Ivanka's neighbors in Colorado, so right down the way. They're staying in D.C., not too far away from the White House. But Ed, as we think about the first 100 days for a President Trump, the top priority, keeping the government open beyond Friday. Most likely this will happen by a continuing resolution, but has the administration come on a little too strong for insisting funding for this southern border wall to be included in a spending bill?
Well, I guess, you know, we were talking about Obama. Mine was on Michelle and Barack Obama as you were asking that question. So I was thinking about, I think it's a problem for the Democrats. If Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders are the face, people are going to be craving Obama, but either one of them. And I think with just pure politics, the President of the United States knows the border wall really does sell. Out here, I'm in Missouri, you know, we're in sort of middle America. It really sells to say, hey, we need to fund. It's not like we're talking about funding something esoteric. Build the wall and fund it. I think he knows politics, and I think ultimately, you know, I saw Jeff Sessions, I think this morning on one of the MSNBC, I mean NBC maybe, talking about how they would build that wall. They may not make Mexico, you know, expend money, but they may take it out other ways. The American people want that done, so I think there's a little bit of politics going on, and ultimately a deal will be cut. You know, Ryan will get a deal cut. Schumer will cut a deal, I think, in this one in some way, and they'll keep charging ahead.
Mike, you're shaking your head because the president did tweet about the fact that, you know, we may end up paying for it, but somewhere down the line, Mexico will pay for it in some
way. The president promised the American public that Mexico was going to pay for this wall. No, in fact, taxpayers are going to pay for this wall, and it's going to be added to the national debt. And let me correct the record. The American public does not support this wall. I mean, all polling indicates that overwhelmingly that the American public does not support the wall. I think that the dollars should be sort of directed towards policies that actually matter in people's lives. The fact is, Donald Trump will not build a wall. There will be no funding for a wall, and at the end of the day, he's going to backtrack.
Should Democrats go for a government shutdown if it's in there?
Look, at the end of the day, I don't think it's going to come to that, because I think that at the end of the day, the administration is not going to actually, this is all bombast and rhetoric. Donald Trump knows there will be no wall. The Republicans in Congress know there will be no wall. This is a great talking point that agitates a very fringe element of his base.
Well, I think Mike's quoting polls. Again, polls said that Hillary Clinton was going to win Missouri and win the whole shooting match she lost. I don't put much stock in the polls. Out here in America, the place where Wisconsin, Missouri, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, working people say, okay, finally, someone who's going to get serious and build a wall, put a guy like Sessions in charge. That's winning politics, guys. I mean, we may disagree on the policy. The politics is winning, and Trump is making the momentum go his way on that. He really is.
40%, I don't know if the polls would indicate that.
But the Americans that you're talking about, the Americans that you're talking about in Missouri and in Wisconsin and in other red bellwether states, do they really want to pay for it? And that's what it's going to boil down to, the fact that it will come out of their pockets, and with the potential, the overpromise of Mexico will pay for it someday. Are they that into it that they want to pay for it on the front end?
Of course. Yeah, sure. No problem. We'll pay for the wall. I mean, but building the wall now and making Mexico pay by keeping their illegal criminals and everybody else in their country. Americans want safety. They want the wall. It's like trade. We want China and all these other places to play fair. And if it means that some of the costs of goods go up at Walmart, I think our American people will say that's fine because we'd rather have jobs. By the way, Mike, that's a position that some of the Democrats in the old days would join us on. So this is why Trump is transforming the politics, even as, by the way, every day he's doing the policy changes in office. People don't even realize. Judges appointed, the FCC, executive orders. So it's things are getting great again every day. And I think, again, if you want to fight over building the wall and you want to shut down the government over building the wall, the American people are going to side with the president.
If great is 40% on the polls and the most historic low numbers in the history of the presidency, well, then that's really, let's make America great again.
Trump was supposed to be doing his own network, TV network, because the polls said he was going to lose to Hillary. And you all sat there. I was there in New York City. Everyone in New York City said, oh my gosh, Hillary's going to win. Hillary's going to. She spent $1 million on confetti that was like glass shards. You guys were wrong, and so were the polls. And Trump knows it. That's what's happening.
Ed, I know you wrote the book, The Conservative Case for Trump, but you really think winning the White House was the A plan?
I think winning the White House, look, you got to have courage to get in the game. All these guys.
I know, but do you really believe that President Trump, now the president, that this was the A plan, and that they had the team, the staff, everything to go to take over the White House and all that it entails to start?
Right.
That was plan A.
Do you guys remember when a scrawny little state senator from Illinois ran for U.S. Senate and then ran for president? Everybody said you're not supposed to do that. It takes courage beyond what normal people have to run for president. And Trump had the courage to do it, and now he's president. I mean, you got to all argue about whether he meant to do it or not. He did it. He's the president of the United States. Right. It's awesome.
Look, the intention, you know, whether it was the real one or not, he is the president.
He certainly
we'll mark the 100th day coming up on Saturday. Ed, great to have you on, sir. Thank you so much, Ed Martin, Mike Morey. Nice to see you in person here in New York. And we look forward to having you gentlemen back on.